Hi, I'm Nate Seberg, and this is One Day Ahead. Welcome to One Day Ahead to Kill a Mockingbird, Chapters 2 and 3. Here we dive into a summary and analysis of Harper Lee's 1960s classic. If you're an educator, check out my teaching unit. It's got everything you need, link below. As ever, these are not spoiler-free videos, but if you're good to go, well then drown your dinner in syrup and call your teacher a slut, because it's time to dive into Chapters 2 and 3. When Chapter 2 opens, fall has come. Dill is gone, he's probably back doing people's taxes, and Scout is off to the first grade. Miss Caroline Fisher is her teacher, fresh from Winston County. She is living with a neighbor, Miss Maudie Atkinson. We'll get to know her a little bit later. And when Miss Maudie introduced us to her, Jem was in a haze for days. So not only is she a stone-cold hottie, but she's also terrible at her job. After printing the alphabet on the board, she calls on Scout. As I read the alphabet, a faint line appeared between her eyebrows. And after making me read most of my first reader and the stock market quotations from the Mobile Register aloud, she discovered that I was literate and looked at me with more than a faint distaste. Miss Caroline Fisher demands that Atticus stop teaching Scout to read at home and pledges that she will do her best to try to undo the damage. This encounter introduces a recurring theme within the text, the idea that organizations, they're fatally flawed, they're corrupted, they're broken, but that virtuous individuals within those systems can still do good work. We are going to get that with education, most notably with the legal system and with a missionary churchy thing later on. Miss Caroline's not done though. Around lunchtime, she surveys the room. The kids from town go home from lunch, but the kids from the boonies are supposed to bring food with them. She calls out little Walter Cunningham when he isn't able to produce a lunchbox like the rest of the kids. "Where's yours? Did you forget your lunch this morning?" asked Miss Caroline. Walter looked straight ahead. I saw a muscle jump in his skinny jaw. "Did you forget it this morning?" asked Miss Caroline. Walter's jaw twitched again. "Lady, read the room." She offers to loan him a quarter. Now, Walter is dirt poor. He was poor and then the Great Depression happened. He cannot pay back this quarter, so he turns it down. Prodded on by the other cringing children, Scout tries to explain, saying, "You're shaming him, Miss Caroline. Walter hasn't got a quarter at home to bring you." This is too much for Miss Rookie Teacher because she grabbed me by the collar and hauled me back to her desk. "Jean Louise, I've had about enough of you this morning," she said. "Hold out your hand." Miss Caroline picked up her ruler, gave me half a dozen quick little pats, then told me to stand in the corner. A storm of laughter broke loose when it finally occurred to the class that Miss Caroline had whipped me. So, not a great first day. Chapter 3 opens with Scout beating up Walter for getting her in trouble, which seems that's misguided. Jem pulls Scout off him and then invites little Walter home for dinner. Quick note here, in the South, at this time, lunch is dinner and dinner is supper. Deal with it. They walk home together, passing the Radley place, and they talk pleasantly about how the pecans that fall out of the Radley tree are poisoned by Boo. Pretty classic kid stuff. Then we get a line from Scout that shows just how entrenched classism is within Macomb. By the time we reached our front steps, Walter had forgotten he was a Cunningham. Bummer. As the family eats dinner, lunch, Walter has a bit of a faux pas when he poured syrup on his vegetables and meat with a generous hand. He would probably have poured it into his milk glass had I not asked him what the Sam Hill he was doing. This tactless and unkind remark gets Scout pulled by their cook/nanny, Cal, into the kitchen for her to get yelled at. "There are some folks who don't eat like us," she whispered fiercely, "but you ain't called on to contradict them at the table when they don't. That boy's your company, and if he wants to eat up the tablecloth, you let him. You hear?" Scout responds with, "He ain't company, Cal. He's just a Cunningham." Cal's response is cathartic. "Hush your mouth." Angry with Cal, Scout returns to school, where the fireworks resume. It's quite the first day. Miss Fisher is walking around the class, and she lets out a scream when she notices a cootie in a kid's hair. It's like a bug. The kid is Burris Ewell, and beyond this scene, we will actually not see him again. But his father, Bob, I don't ever seem to close my mouth, Ewell, is the villain of this book. We won't see Dad until the latter half of the story, so let's spend a moment with this kid. Burris Ewell is every bit as squalidly poor as Walter Cunningham, but on the social ladder, the Ewells are a step below the Cunninghams. We will get to know why in the deep dive. For now, just know that the Ewells live next to the town dump, and Dad is such a mouth-breathing disaster that his kids forage for food in the garbage, while he freeloads, hunts out of season, and drinks up his welfare money, leaving his children, like Burris here, in squalid, destitute conditions. The only thing the Ewells truly have left is their pride, not dignity, volatile pride. Which is why when Miss Fisher suggests Burris go home and wash his hair with lye soap and kerosene, his reaction is quite the thing. The boy stood up. He was the filthiest human I had ever seen. His neck was dark gray, the backs of his hands were rusty, and his fingernails were black deep into the quick. He peered at Miss Caroline from a fist-sized clean space on his face. The boy laughed rudely. "You ain't sending me home, missus. I was on the verge of leaving. I done my time for this year." So it turns out the Ewells only come to school on the first day to keep the law off their back. It's like a symbolic "we tried" thing from the county. So Burris is leaving, but he is not going quietly. His pride has been wounded in front of everyone, and that, for the Ewells, that requires a response. Pay attention, because this is what we call foreshadowing. Turning at the door, he shouts, "Ain't no snot-nosed slut of a school teacher ever born can make me do nothing." He waited until he was sure she was crying. Then he shuffled out the building. Finally, that night at home, Scout is withdrawn and sad. She retreats to the porch, and in the cool of the evening, Atticus follows her. Bit by bit, I told him the day's misfortune. And she said, "You taught me all wrong, so we can't ever read anymore, ever. Please don't send me back, please, sir." Atticus is gentle, he is kind, he listens, and he imparts this wisdom regarding Miss Fisher. "Scout, you never really understand a person until you consider things from his point of view, sir, until you climb into his skin and walk around in it." He is teaching her empathy. Here begins Scout's real education, and the thing that will save her from being consumed and destroyed by the evil, bigotry, and hate she will encounter in this text. As the chapter closes, they reach an agreement. They will carry on reading at night if Scout will carry on going to school. But they have to keep it a secret because Atticus notes dryly, "I'm afraid our activities would be received with considerable disapprobation by the more learned authorities." And that's chapters 2 and 3. So each chapter we are going to explore the themes and characters by going just a step or two beyond what's on the page. This is Deep Dive Quotes. Our first quote comes from chapter 2. By the time we reached our front steps, Walter had forgotten he was a Cunningham. So these chapters introduce the rather complex and adult theme of social class to the novel. We see straight away that Scout, who is all of 6, has already accepted and internalized the Macomb County social ladder. At the top, we have Atticus and the Finches. They are a well-to-do family with a lineage that is firmly established in the town. Atticus says at one point that they are poor, and they probably are, like, technically, but come on. They literally employ a housekeeper in Cal. He is a lawyer. He has work. Atticus is appointed to the state legislature. They are at the top. To Scout, the Cunninghams are a few rungs below them. And she is so completely enmeshed in this system, she actually thinks it's self-evident. Something Mrs. Fisher should be able to tell just by looking. In the school, when she is prodded forward by her peers to explain why little Walter won't borrow a quarter, the text says, "I rose graciously on Walter's behalf. Miss Caroline." "What is it, Jean Louise?" "Miss Caroline, he's a Cunningham." I sat back down. "What, Jean Louise?" I thought I had made things sufficiently clear. But there is actually more nuance here, because while she does obviously yet semi-unconsciously set herself above Walter, she is also simultaneously really complimentary toward the Cunninghams, painting them as like the right way to be poor. The Cunninghams never took anything they can't pay back. No church baskets and no script stamps. They never took anything off of anybody. They get along on what they have. They don't have much, but they get along on it. She's right. Cunninghams don't have much, but they do have their dignity, and they are unwilling to part with it at any price. We see this through the way Cunningham pays a debt to Atticus. He pays through stovewood and hickory nuts and a bunch of other stuff that they list that I don't actually know what it is. I could Google it. I'm not gonna. Later, we learn Mr. Cunningham will not take a job with the WPA, Works Progress Administration. It's one of those New Deal FDR, let's not all starve during the Great Depression programs, because it would mean in a roundabout way that he would lose his land. Won't do it. Poverty, yes, but dignity too. So why might Lee be spending so much time on the social status of this random family in the boonies? Well, it's to contrast them beautifully with the Ewells. The Ewell family is poor too, dirt poor, but it's clear they are another matter entirely. In that social ladder I keep talking about, the Cunninghams look down on the Ewells, though their bank accounts are probably pretty commensurate. And the reason why comes down to dignity. The Ewells don't have any. The Ewells live beside the town dump, where the Ewell children tragically forage for their food. Unlike the Cunninghams, Mr. Ewell does take welfare money, relief checks, but he drinks that money away every time. Atticus has some harsh words on the subject, really the harshest of the whole novel. Scout writes, Atticus said the Ewells had been the disgrace of Macomb for 3 generations. None of them had done an honest day's work in his recollection. They were people, but they lived like animals. In the Ewell clan, we see Macomb's opinion for the wrong way to be poor. While both are in various stages of being broke, Cunningham works. Ewell doesn't. Cunningham refuses handouts. Ewell drinks them away. Cunningham sends Walter to school whenever he can spare the boy's labor, while Ewell sends Burris only for the first day and to call his teacher a slut. The Cunninghams have dignity. All the Ewells have left is their pride. And as we will see in this chapter, wound their pride and they will lash out. That is going to be important later. Last thing before we move on, there is one and only one group of people the Ewells believe they can look down upon in that entrenched Macomb County social ladder, and we haven't encountered them yet. The black people living in Macomb occupy the true bottom rung of that social ladder. And an insult from one of them to the Ewells could have some really dire consequences. Just bringing it up. Our second quote today, it basically sums up Atticus's whole jam. First of all, he said, if you can learn a simple trick, Scout, you will get along a lot better with all kinds of folks. You never really understand a person until you consider things from his point of view, until you climb into his skin and walk around in it. As we discussed last chapter, this story is about a little girl who loses her innocence to evil, but is able to hold on to her goodness through powerful, wholehearted empathy. And this advice from Atticus is like instructions for how to do empathy. And this will be a hallmark of Atticus and why he is so beloved as a character, because his ability to empathize will approach superhuman levels. People that roundly and viciously and publicly hate him, people that slander his name and insult his children, he will find ways to love, understand, and even admire. Here on this back porch, he is trying to pass along this foundational life skill to Scout regarding Miss Fisher. It doesn't really take in the moment, but we will return to this line again and again as Scout tries to build on this foundation. And that's chapters 2 and 3. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to subscribe, like, check out my teaching unit and my other stuff. Next week, we turn to chapters 4, 5, and 6, where Scout finds treasure, Dill goes fishing, and Jem gets scared out of his pants. All that and more next time on One Day Ahead.